My sister mocked my career and sneered at me for marrying a farm girl, all while bragging about her financial wizard husband. Then his entire investment empire crashed, and suddenly my parents expected me to sell my business to rescue them. The intoxicating blend of freshly ground coffee beans mingling with the sweet allure of vanilla frosting, it's become the very essence of my existence. I own a quaint little bakery and coffee shop, nestled in a quiet neighborhood just outside Portland, Maine. It's nothing grand, perhaps, but it is unequivocally mine. Every worn brick, every antique table, every gleaming counter tells a story, a testament to countless sacrifices and long, arduous nights. My wife, Grace, and I painstakingly built this haven from the ground up, fueled by our life savings and a small business loan we proudly repaid 2 years ahead of schedule. Grace, you see, grew up on a farm in rural Vermont. She possesses a rare blend of practical magic. She can mend a broken fence with practiced ease, bake bread so exquisite it could move you to tears, and manage accounts with a meticulous clarity that would put any CPA to shame. We met 7 years ago, amidst the vibrant chaos of a farmer's market, where she sold her family's produce. I was instantly captivated by her unwavering honesty and the unrestrained joy in her laughter. My sister, Rebecca, however, chose a different path. She married Trevor, a man immersed in the world of high finance, and they resided in a sleek, glass-walled condo in Boston, boasting a panoramic harbor view. Rebecca, bless her heart, never missed an opportunity to subtly, or not so subtly, highlight the dizzying heights of her own perceived success. Family dinners invariably devolved into Rebecca's personal showcase, an elaborate performance featuring her latest designer handbag and glowing reports of Trevor's most recent investment triumph. 3 years ago, at our parents' anniversary celebration, Rebecca cornered me. Grace was in the kitchen, helping Mom, and I found myself scrutinizing the calculated smile on Rebecca's face as her eyes drifted over my simple button-down and jeans. My stomach nodded, a familiar premonition of discomfort. "Still running that little coffee shop?" she asked, a delicate swirl of her wine glass accompanying the question. "The bakery is doing well," I replied, my voice carefully modulated, betraying none of the irritation bubbling beneath. "We just hired 2 new employees." Rebecca laughed. It was a brittle, tinkling sound, like breaking glass. "Oh, that's adorable. Trevor just closed a deal worth more than your shop will probably make in a decade. But I'm sure your quaint little business has its charm." I bit the inside of my cheek hard. "We're happy with what we've built." "Of course you are," she purred, leaning closer, her expensive perfume a cloying cloud around me. "I just worry about you sometimes. You could have done so much more." "And Grace? I mean, she's sweet, but she's so country. Does she even know how to use a latte machine, or is she still churning butter?" The insult landed precisely where she'd aimed it, a poisoned dart. I excused myself, needing to escape before I uttered something I'd regret for years. Grace found me on the porch moments later. She didn't need to ask what had happened. She simply squeezed my hand, a silent anchor, and suggested we leave early. And so, a pattern emerged. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday gathering transformed into another of Rebecca's carefully curated showcases. She'd extol Trevor's genius for spotting lucrative investment opportunities, casually mention their recent vacation to the Maldives, their gleaming new car, or the exclusive private school they were considering for their future children. All the while, her eyes would flit towards Grace and me, laced with a thinly veiled pity that stung. Mom and Dad, bless their hearts, seemed to swallow it whole. They'd always been swayed by the siren song of material success, and Trevor, in their eyes, embodied everything they'd wished I'd become. Dad would engage Trevor in earnest discussions about the stock market, barely acknowledging my recent expansion of the bakery's catering services. Mom, meanwhile, would collect Rebecca's glossy vacation photos like precious trophies. Grace, my steadfast Grace, never uttered a complaint, but I saw the quiet hurt in her eyes when Rebecca made another dismissive comment about simple country living, or subtly suggested Grace might feel more comfortable at a different restaurant because the menu was a bit sophisticated. I began to dread these family gatherings, concocting increasingly elaborate excuses to leave early or, sometimes, to skip them entirely. 2 years ago, Trevor's latest obsession was cryptocurrency. He waxed poetic about some new platform, promising astronomical returns, speaking with such conviction that even I, jaded as I was, almost fell for it. Rebecca, of course, broadcasted their supposed foresight and burgeoning wealth across every social media platform imaginable. One evening my father called. "Your sister and Trevor are doing so well," he said, his tone thick with implied judgment. "Trevor's offered to give me some investment advice. Maybe you should talk to him, too. Get some real financial guidance." The implication stung like a wasp, as if Grace and I were incapable of managing our own money, as if our carefully nurtured bakery was mere child's play compared to Trevor's sophisticated schemes. "We're fine, Dad," I responded, keeping my voice steady. "Our bakery is profitable, and we're saving steadily." He sighed, that familiar sound of paternal disappointment I'd heard my entire life. "You could be doing so much better. Rebecca's worried about you." I longed to retort that Rebecca worried about no one but herself, but I let it go. Arguing, I'd learned, never changed anything. Then, last spring, the earth shifted beneath their feet. Trevor, with his impressive vocabulary and even more impressive self-assurance, had convinced not only Rebecca but also my parents to sink significant amounts into his cryptocurrency platform. He swore it was safe, backed by blockchain technology they didn't understand but trusted blindly because Trevor spoke with such authority. Rebecca, in a breathtaking display of confidence, took out a second mortgage on their condo to invest even more, sharing glossy photos from investment seminars, proudly dubbing Trevor her financial wizard. And then, it all collapsed. Overnight. The company behind the platform vanished, a sophisticated scam, its founders disappearing with millions. Trevor lost everything he'd invested, along with the funds from dozens of clients he'd drawn into the scheme. The lawsuits began immediately, a tidal wave of ruin. Rebecca called me, sobbing so uncontrollably that her words were almost indistinguishable. "We're going to lose the condo," she gasped. "Trevor's firm fired him. We have nothing left." A part of me, the human part, felt a pang of genuine sympathy. But another darker part, the part that remembered every sneering insult, every dismissive comment, felt something akin to grim satisfaction. I pushed that unwelcome thought aside. "What can I do to help?" I asked. "Just be there," she choked out. "I need family right now." That weekend I drove to Boston. Their condo, once a beacon of sleek success, was in disarray. Moving boxes were strewn everywhere. Rebecca's designer clothes lay in disheveled piles on the couch, and Trevor sat hunched at the kitchen counter, staring blankly at his laptop, his eyes hollow. He looked as if he'd aged a decade in a matter of weeks. Rebecca clung to me when I arrived, desperate, like I was a life raft in a churning sea. She offered no apologies for the years of slights, but her desperation was raw and genuine. They had truly lost everything. The bank was foreclosing, and they had nowhere else to turn. "We're moving in with Mom and Dad temporarily," Rebecca told me, her voice flat. "Just until Trevor finds new work." I nodded, offering what comfort I could. Grace, in her quiet wisdom, had packed me off with homemade casseroles and freshly baked bread, the kind of practical, real help that actually makes a difference. Rebecca barely acknowledged it. The true gravity of their situation, and ours, unfurled itself 2 weeks later when Dad called. His voice was taut with an unfamiliar stress. "We need to have a family meeting," he stated. "All of us. This weekend." Grace and I drove up to my parents' house in New Hampshire that Saturday morning. Rebecca and Trevor were already there, looking utterly exhausted and defeated. Mom's eyes were visibly swollen from crying. Dad sat at the head of the dining table, a scatter of official-looking papers spread before him like damning evidence. "We're in serious financial trouble," Dad announced, skipping any preamble. "Your mother and I invested our retirement savings based on Trevor's advice. We've lost almost everything." My stomach plummeted. "How much?" I managed to ask. "Enough that we can't afford to keep the house," Mom murmured, her voice barely a whisper. We're going to have to sell. Rebecca started crying again, a fresh wave of despair washing over her. Trevor stared fixedly at his hands. I felt numb, struggling to process the enormity of this. My parents, always so meticulously careful with their money. Dad cleared his throat, a sound heavy with dread. We've been discussing options. There's a way to fix this, but it requires sacrifice from everyone. Something in his tone made every muscle in my body tense. Under the table, Grace's hand found mine, a quiet reassurance. Your bakery is worth quite a bit now, Dad continued, his gaze locking onto mine. We had it appraised. If you sold it, the money would be enough to save our house and give Rebecca and Trevor a fresh start. You could find other work. Grace could go back to Vermont. You're both young enough to start over. The words hung in the air like a noxious gas, poisoning the room. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Grace's hand tightened on mine, a lifeline. You want me to sell my business? I said, the words slow and deliberate, dripping with disbelief. The business Grace and I spent 7 years building? To fix a situation we had nothing to do with. Family helps family, Mom interjected, her voice wavering. We've always been there for you. Have you? The question erupted from me, sharper than I intended, laced with years of pent-up resentment. Because I remember every family dinner where you praised Rebecca and ignored me. Every time you dismissed what Grace and I accomplished. Rebecca looked up, mascara streaking down her face. Please, she pleaded. We have nowhere else to turn. You're my sister, and you spent years treating me like I was less than you. I shot back, my voice now shaking with an anger that was finally unleashed. Calling my work cute, insulting my wife, acting like we were an embarrassment to the family. That's not fair, Rebecca protested. I never meant, you meant every word. I cut her off. I stood up, pulling Grace gently to her feet beside me. You looked down on us because we didn't have your lifestyle. You mocked Grace for being from a farm. You suggested our business was beneath you. Dad's face was turning a dangerous shade of red. This isn't the time for grievances, he thundered. Your mother and I are about to lose everything because you invested in something without doing your own research. I retorted, meeting his gaze squarely. Because you trusted Trevor's judgment over common sense. That's not my responsibility. So, you're going to let us become homeless? Mom's voice cracked, thick with manipulative anguish. Your own parents? The guilt descended upon me, heavy and suffocating, like a physical weight. Grace, ever my anchor, squeezed my hand, and I drew a surge of strength from her silent presence. I'll help you find resources, I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my soul. I'll help you downsize and find a smaller place you can afford. But I'm not selling my business. It's not fair to ask that of us. Not fair! Dad roared, his chair scraping loudly as he pushed it back. We raised you. We put you through college. And now, when we need you, you're going to abandon us? You're asking me to destroy everything I built. I countered. Would you have asked Rebecca to sell her condo before she lost it? The silence that followed was deafening, a profound answer to my rhetorical question. They would never have asked Rebecca to sacrifice. She was the successful one, the child they were proud of. I was merely the backup plan, the dutiful family member who was supposed to be grateful for the paltry scraps of attention they threw my way. Grace and I turned and left. The drive home was quiet, heavy with unspoken emotions. I kept bracing myself, expecting her to tell me I'd made the wrong choice, that I'd been cruel. Instead, she simply held my hand, her grip firm and reassuring, and told me she was proud of me. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Dad branded me a selfish disappointment. Mom barraged me with lengthy text messages about family values and how I was breaking her heart. Rebecca posted vague, passive-aggressive messages on social media about being betrayed by the people you trust most. Distant relatives I barely knew started messaging me, asking if the rumors of me letting my parents lose their house were true. The pressure was suffocating, a vice tightening around my chest. I stopped sleeping soundly. Every time my phone rang, a wave of nausea washed over me. Grace, with her quiet resilience, suggested we take a much-needed break from social media and instead focus on what we could control. Our bakery, once just a dream, became my sanctuary. The familiar rhythm of baking bread before dawn, the comforting presence of regular customers who knew our names, the warm, comforting scent of cinnamon and coffee, this was real. This was what Grace and I had built together, brick by fragrant brick. No one, I vowed, could take that away. 3 months trickled by. My parents sold their house, moving into a small, rented apartment. Rebecca and Trevor eventually found new jobs, far from their previous lofty positions, but enough to survive. They rented a modest place outside Boston. Dad stopped calling. Mom's texts became less frequent, then dwindled to almost nothing. I tried, truly tried, not to let it hurt, but it did. Sometimes, late at night, Grace would find me staring at old family photos, a silent ache in my heart. She'd simply sit beside me, saying nothing, her presence a balm. Her quiet strength was always enough. Yet the silence from my family left a strange, hollow void. As the holidays approached, for the first time in my life, I had no idea where I would spend them. Grace, observing my quiet turmoil, suggested we host Thanksgiving at our house, inviting her parents and siblings up from Vermont. The idea, initially, terrified me, a whirlwind meeting with her entire extended family. But the alternative felt worse, spending the day alone. Or pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Her family arrived the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, a cheerful caravan of pickup trucks. Her father, Robert, a man whose hands looked like tree bark, shook mine with a firm, genuine grip, telling me he'd heard good things about my bread. Her mother, Susan, arrived with 3 homemade pies and immediately, instinctively, started helping Grace in our kitchen, moving with a synchronized grace as if they'd choreographed it years ago. Her 2 brothers, both farmers like their parents, were quieter, but their kindness was palpable, and they asked genuinely intelligent questions about our business model and profit margins. The contrast to my own family gatherings couldn't have been starker. There was no performance here, no thinly veiled competition. When Grace's younger sister inquired about the bakery, she genuinely wanted to understand our daily operations, not to measure it against her own life. When Robert spoke of the farm's harvest, no one attempted to one-up him with tales of more impressive accomplishments. We gathered around our small dining table, chairs borrowed from neighbors to accommodate everyone. The food was simple, honest, a turkey Robert had raised himself, vegetables from their farm, Grace's legendary stuffing recipe, passed down from her grandmother. No one mentioned the cost of anything, or name-dropped restaurants they'd frequented. They simply ate, laughed, and shared stories of Grace as a child that made her blush with good-natured embarrassment. After dinner, as we cleared the dishes, Susan gently pulled me aside. Her eyes, warm behind her wire-rimmed glasses, held a profound understanding. "Grace told me about your family situation," she said softly. "I won't pretend to understand how they could ask that of you, but I want you to know that you'll always have a place at our table. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up for you." Tears pricked my eyes, hot and unexpected. "Thank you," I managed, my voice thick. "That means more than you know. Grace chose well when she chose you," Susan continued, her smile tender. "We could see that the first time she brought you home. You make her happy. You respect her. That's all we've ever wanted for our girl." The acceptance felt foreign, a balm to years of feeling inadequate in my own parents' eyes. I hugged Susan, and she patted my back with the same affection she'd show one of her own children. That night, after everyone had settled into various corners of our house for the night, Grace and I sat on our back porch, mugs of tea warming our hands as the November air nipped at us. "Your family is wonderful," I said, gazing at the frosty air escaping my lips. Grace smiled softly. "They liked you too. Dad said you asked good questions. That's high praise from him." I chuckled. I kept waiting for someone to criticize something, the house, our careers, our choices. But they just accepted everything. That's what family should do, Grace said simply, leaning her head on my shoulder. I know you're hurting about your parents, about Rebecca. But maybe this is a chance to build something different. To choose the family you want, not just accept the one you were born into. Her words resonated deep within me, settling a quiet storm. I realized I'd been grieving the family I wished I had, instead of appreciating the beautiful one I was actively building. December brought the inevitable holiday rush at the bakery. We were slammed with orders for cookies, special breads, and custom cakes, working 16-hour days, arriving before dawn and leaving long after dark. Grace managed the bustling front of the shop, while I oversaw production in the back, our 2 college student employees working overtime to keep pace. One particularly brutal morning, after I'd been up since 3 a.m. perfecting peppermint bark and gingerbread, a familiar car pulled up outside. Through the bakery window, I saw Dad step out. My stomach clenched instantly. He came inside, looking visibly uncomfortable in our small, fragrant space. Grace, at the register, stiffened. She called back to me, and I emerged from the kitchen, flour dusting my apron. Dad, I said neutrally, my voice betraying nothing. What brings you here? I wanted to see the place, he said, glancing around. Your mother and I drove down. She's in the car. She wasn't sure if she should come in. I looked past him, spotting Mom in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, her posture hunched and defeated. Something in her vulnerability made my anger waver, just slightly. You can both come in, I said. Grace, can you get them coffee? Grace nodded, her expression still guarded, and poured 2 steaming cups while I led my parents to a quiet corner table, away from the other customers. Mom looked as if she'd aged 5 years in as many months, her hair grayer, her face etched with stress. Dad's shoulders slumped in a way I'd never witnessed before. These weren't the confident, demanding parents who had asked me to sacrifice my life's work. These were 2 people who had gambled everything and lost. The shop is lovely, Mom said quietly, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. So cozy. You've really built something special here. Thank you, I replied, still wary, uncertain of where this conversation was heading. Dad cleared his throat. We've been seeing a therapist. Both of us. After everything that happened, we realized we needed help processing it. This revelation genuinely surprised me. My parents had always viewed therapy as a weakness, something other people needed. Our therapist has been helping us understand some patterns, Mom continued, her voice soft. How we treated you and Rebecca differently. How we valued certain things over others. It's been hard to face. We came here to apologize properly, Dad said, his voice cracking slightly. Not over the phone. Face to face. What we asked of you was unconscionable. We were desperate and scared, but that doesn't excuse it. I sat back in my chair, absorbing their words. An apology was far more than I had expected, but years of hurt wouldn't simply vanish with a few sentences. You asked me to destroy my life's work, I said quietly, the pain still raw. To give up everything Grace and I built together, and you did it while barely acknowledging that what we have is valuable. I know, Dad admitted, his gaze fixed on his mug. We were so focused on Trevor's success, on Rebecca's lifestyle, that we couldn't see what you'd accomplished. We measured worth in the wrong currency. Mom wiped at her eyes. I was so proud of Rebecca's fancy condo and her designer clothes. I bragged to my friends about her husband, the investor. But you know what I never talked about? How my other child started a business from nothing. How you and Grace worked every single day to build something sustainable. That was the real accomplishment, and I couldn't see it. Why? I asked, a lingering question finally voiced. Why was Rebecca's life always more impressive? Dad looked up, his eyes meeting mine. Because it's what we wanted for ourselves and never had. We grew up without much. When your mother and I got married, we dreamed of wealth and status. We achieved comfortable, but never impressive. Rebecca seemed to have everything we'd wanted, Mom added, but it was all an illusion. Built on debt and risk and Trevor's arrogance. While you built something real, with actual foundations. We were too busy envying the illusion to respect the reality. Grace, who had been listening from behind the counter, came over to refill their coffee cups. Mom reached out and gently touched her hand. "Grace, I owe you a separate apology," she said, her voice filled with genuine remorse. "The way we treated you, the dismissive comments about your background, that was cruel and snobbish and wrong. You're an exceptional person, and I'm ashamed I couldn't see that." Grace's expression softened slightly. "I appreciate you saying that. It hurt, being treated like I wasn't good enough. You were always too good for this family," Dad said with a sad, wistful smile. "You had the sense to build a life based on actual values instead of appearances." We talked for another hour. My parents spoke of their therapy sessions, the painful realizations they were having about how they'd raised us, the heavy regrets they carried. They weren't asking for immediate forgiveness, exactly, but rather offering the truth as they now understood it. When they finally left, Mom hugged me tight. "I understand if you need distance," she whispered, her voice laced with a plea. "But I hope someday we can rebuild something, even if it's different from before." After their car pulled away, I stood in the bakery, feeling utterly emotionally wrung out. Grace came and wrapped her arms around me from behind. "That was big of them," she murmured. "Coming here. Admitting all that. It doesn't erase anything," I said, a faint tremor in my voice. "No," she agreed, "but it's a start. If you want it to be." I turned to face her, looking into her clear, understanding eyes. "What do you think?" Grace considered the question thoughtfully. "I think people can change. I think your parents are genuinely trying to understand where they went wrong. But I also think you don't owe them forgiveness on any timeline but your own. Take the space you need." Her wisdom, as always, constantly amazed me. She had been the one most deeply hurt by my family's dismissive treatment, yet she could still perceive their genuine attempt at redemption with such clear-eyed compassion. The remainder of December passed in a blur of holiday orders and relentless shifts. But somehow, my parents' visit had loosened something in my chest. The sharp, bitter edge of the anger I'd been carrying felt less potent, more like a bruise that was finally beginning to heal. In early January, I called Rebecca. She answered on the third ring, her voice tinged with surprise. "Hey," I said, a nervous flutter in my stomach. "Just wanted to check in, see how you're doing." There was a pause, a breath held. "I'm okay," she finally replied, her voice softer than I remembered. "Working a lot. Trevor and I are still adjusting to our new normal. It's strange, being the ones who need help instead of offering it." I told her about Mom and Dad's visit to the bakery, about their apology. "I know," she said quietly. "They told me. They've been working hard in therapy. I've been going separately, trying to understand why I treated you the way I did." Rebecca sighed, a sound heavy with regret. "I was miserable, you know? Living above our means, constantly stressed about maintaining appearances, feeling utterly empty despite having everything I thought I wanted. You seemed content with less, and it infuriated me. Like you'd figured out some secret I was missing." "The secret," I told her, "was simply being honest about what we wanted. Grace and I never pretended to want a different life than the one we were building." "I know that now," she conceded. "But back then, your contentment felt like a judgment of my choices. So I judged yours first, to protect myself from facing how truly unhappy I was." We talked for 2 hours. Rebecca spoke of her new job managing a small office, how strange it felt to work regular hours for a modest salary. She described how she and Trevor were learning to find satisfaction in simplicity, how she donated all her designer clothes and felt lighter for it. "I don't expect us to be close again," Rebecca said near the end of our conversation, her voice fragile. "I know I damaged something that might not heal, but I want you to know I see you now, who you really are, what you built. And I'm genuinely impressed." After we hung up, I sat with Grace in our living room. She was knitting, a new hobby she'd recently taken up, while I idly flipped through bakery supply catalogs. "Rebecca called," I said. "We talked for a long time. How was it?" Grace asked, setting down her needles. Honest. Maybe for the first time ever, she's changed. Or maybe she's finally showing me who she really was underneath all the performance. Grace picked up her knitting again. Do you think you'll be able to forgive them eventually? I think so, I replied, a sense of peace settling over me. But it's not about forgetting what happened. It's about accepting that people are complicated. They hurt me because they were hurting. That doesn't excuse it, but it helps me understand it. You're kinder than I'd be, Grace murmured, a faint smile playing on her lips. You're the one who taught me that holding on to anger only poisons yourself. I reminded her, reaching for her hand. I'm just finally learning the lesson. She smiled, a warm, knowing light in her eyes, and returned to her knitting. I watched her hands move, creating something beautiful from nothing with patience and skill. That's what we've been doing all along, I thought, creating something from nothing, stitch by stitch, day by day. Business, as it often does, surged in the new year. We were featured in the local magazine's Best of issue, and the resulting publicity brought in a flood of new customers. Our catering calendar quickly filled with spring weddings and corporate events. Grace, ever the astute planner, hired an assistant to help with the burgeoning administrative work. Then, one crisp February morning, a man in an expensive suit walked into the bakery. He introduced himself as Daniel, a commercial real estate developer who, he explained, had been tracking our success. He wanted to discuss a business opportunity. We met with him that afternoon in our small office behind the kitchen. Daniel unfurled plans for a new mixed-use development he was constructing downtown. He wanted our bakery to be the anchor tenant for the retail space. I've been watching businesses in this city for 15 years, Daniel stated, his gaze direct. Most fail within 3. But you two have built something sustainable, something real. That's rare. I want that energy in my development. Grace and I exchanged disbelieving glances. This was bigger, far bigger, than anything we had ever dared to imagine. The space he offered was 3 times the size of our current shop. The rent was higher, certainly, but manageable with our growing revenue. The location alone would grant us access to the vibrant downtown lunch crowd and a steady stream of tourists. We'll need to think about it. I managed, my voice a little breathless. Of course. Take your time, he said, rising. But I think this could be transformative for your business. After Daniel left, Grace and I simply stared at each other, stunned. Is this really happening? Grace whispered. I think it is, I breathed, a sense of awe washing over me. We've actually built something big enough that developers are seeking us out. Grace started laughing then, a slightly hysterical, joyful sound. Remember when Rebecca called the bakery your little coffee shop? When she acted like we were just playing at business? I remember. I grinned back. And now we're being recruited for a major development project. Our little coffee shop is so successful that people are competing for our business. The profound irony was not lost on either of us. We spent the next week meticulously analyzing the opportunity, running numbers, consulting with our accountant. The expansion, while undeniably risky, felt manageable. We need to hire more staff, invest in additional equipment, and take on more financial responsibility, yes, but the potential was enormous. Then my Aunt Paula called. Paula was Mom's younger sister, the one who'd always been considered the black sheep of the family for choosing a creative career over something more practical. I hadn't spoken to her much over the years. I heard what happened, she said, her voice warm and steady. I wanted you to know that what your parents asked was completely unreasonable. The validation hit me harder than I expected, a wave of relief washing over me. I hadn't realized how much I'd been questioning my own judgment, wondering if I truly was selfish. Paula continued, I watched how Rebecca treated you for years. How your parents played favorites. You don't owe them your dreams. We talked for over an hour. She shared her own experiences of being the family disappointment, how she'd eventually stopped trying to win approval she would never receive. Her words, so honest and empathetic, gave me explicit permission to stop carrying a guilt that was never truly mine. 7 months after that fraught confrontation, a letter from a lawyer arrived. My heart sank as I opened it, bracing myself for some new legal action from my parents. Instead, it was from a longtime client of ours, a wonderful woman named Dorothy, who had been coming to our bakery since we first opened. She wanted to invest in our business, to help us expand to a second location. Grace and I met with her attorney, a man named James, who explained that Dorothy had been deeply impressed by our unwavering work ethic and the consistent quality of our products. She saw immense potential for growth and wanted to be a part of it. This investment, he clarified, would allow us to open a larger, downtown location while simultaneously keeping our beloved original shop. It felt utterly surreal. After months of being told we were selfish and foolish, someone saw genuine, tangible value in what we had so carefully created. We spent weeks meticulously reviewing the proposal, consulting with our own lawyer, ensuring every detail was legitimate. Grace was initially skeptical, worried it was too good to be true, but every single detail checked out. We signed the papers in late November. James guided us through every clause, ensuring we fully understood our rights and responsibilities. Dorothy herself attended the signing, shaking our hands warmly, her eyes alight as she told us, "I believe in what you're building." The new location opened just 4 months later. It was twice the size of our original shop, boasting a full kitchen and seating for 60 people. We hired 8 new employees, training them with the same meticulous care and passion with which we had built everything else. The grand opening was packed, a vibrant celebration. Local press covered it, and the mayor himself attended, offering kind words about our small business success story. I looked around at the bustling crowd of customers and staff, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time: pride, pure and unqualified. Rebecca saw the newspaper article. She called me for the first time in almost a year. "Congratulations," she said, her voice sounding strange, as if the words were difficult to form. "Your new place looks amazing." "Thank you," I replied carefully, uncertain of the sincerity. "I've been thinking a lot lately," she continued, "about things I said, how I treated you and Grace. I was wrong." I didn't respond immediately. A part of me yearned to accept the apology and simply move forward. Another part, however, remembered years of small, cruel barbs. "I was so caught up in appearances," Rebecca confessed when I remained silent. "In proving I'd made the right choices. I made you feel small because it made me feel big. That's inexcusable." "It is," I agreed, the quiet truth echoing between us. "You hurt us both, repeatedly." "I know," she sighed, sounding utterly exhausted. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that losing everything taught me what actually matters. And I'm sorry I couldn't see it before." We talked for a few more minutes. She told me about her new job managing a small office, how different her life was now, how Trevor was in therapy, grappling with the immense guilt of losing so many people's money. They were learning to live simply, she said. I didn't offer immediate reconciliation, but I didn't slam the door completely either. Some wounds, I knew, simply needed time. Mom called 2 weeks after Rebecca did. Her voice was smaller than I remembered, tinged with a fragile vulnerability. "Your father is proud of you," she said. "He won't admit it, but he is. We saw the article about your new location." "That's good to hear," I said neutrally, my guard still up. "We were wrong," Mom continued, her voice breaking. "What we asked of you, it wasn't fair." I waited, knowing there was more. "I've been thinking about how we treated Grace," she confessed. "The things Rebecca said that we laughed at or ignored. She's a remarkable woman, and we didn't see that. We were too busy comparing accomplishments that don't actually matter. Grace is the strongest person I know," I told her, my voice firm with conviction. "She's the reason I had the courage to say no to you. I'm grateful to her for that. Even if it didn't feel that way at the time," Mom said, a new quiet strength in her voice. "You made the right choice." We didn't suddenly become a close-knit family again. The distance remained, a silent testament to past hurts. But something undeniably had shifted. My parents came to visit the new bakery a month later. Dad shook Grace's hand, a genuine gesture, and thanked her for the bread she'd sent them during their move. Mom asked about Grace's family in Vermont, actually listening intently to the answers. Rebecca came too, with Trevor. They looked different now, more worn, perhaps, but somehow more real, less like characters in an elaborate play. Rebecca complimented Grace's dress without any hidden barbs, a simple, sincere observation. Trevor apologized for the investment advice, taking full responsibility without a single excuse. We had coffee together at one of the news shop's tables. The conversation was awkward at first, everyone navigating the new terrain with cautious politeness, but gradually, it relaxed into something almost comfortable. Rebecca asked about our expansion plans. Dad wanted to know about our business model. Mom even told Grace, directly, that she'd been wrong about her. As I watched my family around that table, a profound realization washed over me. I had spent years seeking their approval, measuring my worth by their fleeting standards. Saying no to them, refusing to sacrifice what Grace and I had so painstakingly built, had finally freed me from that suffocating cycle. I no longer needed their validation for my choices. Under the table, Grace reached over and squeezed my hand. She had been mostly quiet throughout the conversation, but her eyes were bright, filled with a serene knowing. She had never needed anyone's approval. She had known her worth from the very beginning. I, it seemed, was just finally catching up. The second bakery thrived, exceeding all expectations. Within a year, we paid off the expansion costs ahead of schedule. Dorothy's investment proved a wise one, paying dividends for everyone involved. We began receiving requests to supply pastries to restaurants and cafes throughout the city. Grace, channeling her farm background and natural knack for organization, developed a specialized catering arm of the business focused on farm-to-table events, a seamless blend of her roots and our bakery expertise. We bought a house, nothing extravagant, but it was ours, a place where Grace could cultivate a vibrant garden, growing the very vegetables and herbs we used in the bakery. We adopted a golden retriever, a goofy, loving dog named Biscuit, who quickly became the unofficial mascot of our original location. Rebecca, too, painstakingly rebuilt her life. She and Trevor started a financial counseling business, dedicating themselves to helping people avoid the very mistakes they had made. They specialized in working with middle-class families, patiently teaching them how to spot investment scams and build sustainable savings. It was humbler work than Trevor's old job, certainly, but it seemed to bring them a genuine, quiet satisfaction. My parents, in their own way, adjusted to their smaller, simpler life. Dad took up woodworking, crafting beautiful cutting boards that we proudly sold at the bakery. Mom volunteered at a local community center. They seemed, paradoxically, lighter than they had been before, shed of the exhausting pressure of maintaining false appearances. Family dinners, when they happened, became smaller, more intimate affairs. No more competitions, no more strained comparisons. Rebecca spoke of her clients' successes with real enthusiasm. I shared stories about our bakery staff, the young people we were mentoring. Grace, with a twinkle in her eye, recounted funny anecdotes about the chickens she'd somehow convinced me to keep in our backyard. One evening, about 2 years after everything had fallen apart, and then, miraculously, come back together differently, Rebecca pulled me aside as we were clearing dishes. "I looked down on your life," she confessed quietly, her voice tinged with a profound sadness. "Because I was terrified mine was hollow. Everything Trevor and I had was built on risk and luck and showing off. You and Grace built something real, something that lasted. I envied that, even while I was mocking it. Why didn't you just say that?" I asked, genuinely curious. She smiled sadly. "Because admitting it would have meant facing how empty I truly felt. It was easier to pretend your life was small than to acknowledge mine wasn't big at all." I understood. We had all been performing for each other, desperately trying to prove something that didn't need proving. The collapse of Trevor's investments had stripped away the performance, leaving only the raw, often painful truth of what was real. Standing in my parents' small, humble kitchen, I didn't feel angry anymore. The bitterness that had resided in my chest for so long had finally dissolved, replaced by a quiet acceptance. Rebecca was my sister, flawed and human. My parents were simply people who had made mistakes. Grace was the unwavering partner who had stood beside me through all of it. And I was someone who had finally learned to value her own judgment over the fleeting approval of others. The bakery continued its steady, organic growth. We opened a third location 2 years later, this one in a charming neighboring town. Grace's catering business flourished, becoming successful enough to operate semi-independently. We hired a dedicated manager for this new shop, a brilliant young woman named Tasha, who had worked her way up from our original shop's counter staff. Life wasn't perfect, of course. We had hard days, disagreements, and moments of intense stress. But it was ours, built on our terms, shaped by our choices. Nobody could take that away, or diminish it with cutting remarks about country girls, or little shops. We had also brought on dedicated managers for our original location and the downtown shop, trustworthy people like Michelle and Carlos, who shared our values and work ethic. They allowed Grace and me to focus on the broader vision, ensuring our day-to-day operations ran seamlessly. Sometimes, late at night, I'd walk through our original bakery, my fingers tracing the grain of the counter Grace and I had installed ourselves. I'd remember the raw fear of starting with nothing, the bone-deep exhaustion of those first lean years, the sting of Rebecca's casual cruelties, the crushing pressure when my parents had demanded I sacrifice everything. And I'd remember the exact moment I chose to say no, to protect what we built, to trust that Grace and I knew what we were doing, even when our own family doubted us. That choice had come at a cost: damaged family relationships, months of gnawing guilt and second-guessing, sleepless nights spent wondering if I'd been utterly wrong. But it had also given me something immeasurably invaluable: the undeniable knowledge that I could stand up for myself and survive. That my judgment was sound. That the life Grace and I had so lovingly created was worth defending. As the comforting smell of tomorrow's bread baking drifted from the kitchen, I'd picture Grace in the back office, her reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewing catering orders. Biscuit would be sound asleep in his favorite bed by the door, a soft, contented sigh escaping him. And in those quiet moments, I'd feel a profound gratitude for every single choice that had led me here, even the most painful ones. Because this life, with its early mornings and flour-dusted aprons, and the remarkable woman who could fix fences, balance books, and believe in me when no one else would, this was everything I needed it to be.